That's how much respect that you have. It's almost like you got this branding stamp that if he said it, it's true.
When ESPN hired me, I didn't have a Twitter account.
My name is Cam Newton the Sum, Mr. Boogie to All, and today we're in for a treat because we at Iconic Saga produces content for the masses and funky stuff for your asses. We are in a treat for a guest that needs no introduction if you're in the sports world, and I owe him a big pat on his back for not only entrusting in me, but allowing me to have this, let's say dance, but this interview. Mr. Adam Schefter.
First of all, I never come onto my podcast with words like that, an introduction like that. I never have a crew like this. I never got cigars like this. You are big time, and I'm just honored to be with you here this evening. This is an impressive setup here, Cam.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So I was going through a lot of things, and I was like, what is Adam Schefter? Like the job title. Like if you were to give me a business card right now, it'd say Adam Jeffrey Samuel Bartholomew Schefter, right? What would the job title be? Because
I like to think of myself as a plain, simple guy, right? A by-the-book kind of guy.
Right.
So ESPN calls me Senior National Insider, I think, or Senior NFL Insider. I don't even know my official title.
Right.
Senior NFL Insider. So that would be my title, something that I've now done for 32 plus years.
Wow.
32 plus years since 1990.
I'm 32.
So I've done it as long as I started covering the NFL in 1990. You born in 1990?
89.
There we go. And so that makes me senior,
right.
Not as senior as Chris Mortensen, who's very senior. He's the very senior NFL insider, and I'm just the senior NFL insider. And your job is, I think, in a way, to just look after everything that happens in the National Football League, whether it's a player being signed, traded, coach being hired or fired, any injuries, moves.
Right.
There's so much interest in the players, in the sport, that your job is to do the best job you can covering it, which is not always easy, but that's what we do.
Right. I think the thing right here that my first question would be, covering the NFL for so long, and when you talk about validation and I remember certain issues in the world of sports, it wasn't true until I seen Adam Schefter breaking news, this person has signed. That's how much respect that you have. So it's almost like you got this branding stamp that if he said it, it's true. Sometimes fortunately, and sometimes unfortunately, because it may not always be good news. So with that said, I think your life, and the reason why I asked you what your job description is, because so much of what I see you do and a lot of other people see you do is, you tweet. I mean, you're always on the phone. Even when you're on air, you're like always on the phone. And at what time of your career out of those 32 years did you start realizing like, man, what is this Twitter thing? Like, this is a real life thing and I can use this to my benefit to deliver information to the world or for the world to see?
First of all, for you to say that, for me to stamp somebody or stamp an issue is true, that's as nice a compliment as somebody could hear. Because there are so many times that you're doubted or questioned. I could go through a list of things, and there are people that are questioning, criticizing, whatever it may be, but you're just trying to be accurate and fair. And so to hear that warms my heart. To know when it's taking shape, it's hard to tell, but I can tell you this. The amazing thing to me is that when I left NFL Network in the spring of 2009, over 13 years ago, when ESPN hired me, and this is hard to imagine, I didn't have a Twitter profile or a Twitter
in 2009?
In 2009. Did not have a Twitter account.
Wow.
That's what I'm trying to say. So I get hired at ESPN, And I started in August of 2009. I started my Twitter account in late June of 2009. ESPN hired me in April. So they hired me in April. I start Twitter. In June, I'm on air for the first time in August. And it's hard for me to think that in this day and age, so much is about social media, followings, platforms.
Correct.
And when I entered the world at ESPN, I didn't have any of that. I had no Instagram account. I had no Facebook account. I had no Twitter account. And I had no nothing.
Right.
So I still, it's hard for me to understand that they would give me that chance to develop into the person and reporter that you're referring to.
Correct.
When it's all relatively new.
As NFL players, as most polarizing and as popular as the NFL game is, and I've always been on record to say the Super Bowl should be a national holiday.
It is.
You know what I'm saying?
It is a national holiday.
The way people kind of gravitate and how it brings so many different people, cultures, religions, whatever together and happiness, it should be a holiday, right? But, for me, football doesn't give you a face. We're masked athletes, right? And for so long, I was trying to step outside of the realm of, hey, I really love art. I really love Jean-Michel Basquiat, right? Which was one of the inspirations of me growing my hair the way I grew my hair.
Wow.
And it's like, I really love fashion. So when Cam's being caught wearing these exotic hats and all these different things, it's like, oh man, I would never wear that. But it's like, I'm trying to say to the world, like, these are the things that I'm into. NFL is a great establishment. NBA is a great establishment entity, but they're doing things that promotes them. And that's fair, right? But at the end of the day, the NFL, it's hard for people to kind of see when certain people walk in. Now, when Tom Brady walks in, oh man, that's, in some places he may be recognized as Giselle's husband, right? But in more places, in the U.S., I would say, he's Tom Brady. You know who Odell is. You know who, Russell Wilson is. You know who Aaron Rodgers is. But what about Aaron Darnold? What about Von Miller? And not to say that they're not noticed, right? But at the same time, we have things that makes us human. And to this point, with me having kids, I'm more relatable as a father, as a black father, rather than as an NFL quarterback. And
I didn't know that that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yes, sir.
And where does your fashion sense come from?
Church.
Church.
Born and raised in the church. So my father's a preacher, still is a preacher, oversees 5 different ministries. And growing up in church, I went to a Pentecostal church, which is, I didn't start watching NFL football until college, really. I mean, the Falcons had went to the NFC Championship, I think in 2004, but I wasn't really paying attention until everyday, NFL football until I was up in age. I was more college, right? And growing up in church, my grandmother, even though the Bible says, come as you are, I wasn't walking in there with no flip-flops and no sandals or no socks and no gym shorts or whatever. We had to iron our clothes the night before. My dad taught me at an early age how to polish shoes. He taught me at an early age, certain things that it rolled over into my adult life in fashion, from tying ties, bow ties, lapel pins, pocket squares, belts, socks, no socks, things like that. And it just, I just felt comfortable with being in a business casual look or, business attire.
Do you pass that on to your kids now? Do they have snazzy outfits like you do and cool hats and things like that?
Snazzy? Cool hats? I don't know. But at the same time, I see differences in my children. And I'm able to see Kamitis in a different sense than I see Chosen. And Chosen is I dress them all completely different because they all have their own personalities. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the biggest opponent that I've been trying to preach since day one when I walked into the NFL. It's like, be uniquely you. You know what I'm saying? And oftentimes we don't have opportunities to do that. So this is why this is my platform in Funky Friday, where I want to dive into your background. I want to dive into, what makes you tick, because you're diving into mine. And even if you didn't know certain things before, now you know and you can understand Cam Newton in a different space. And for me, as I'm dressing my children differently, and I know from the dressing, they start having their own personas and personalities kind of come to life. And even the people behind the scenes who are producers of the show, they're able to kind of see, man, Suge, who's Comitis, he has his own personality, just like Sovereign Dior and things like that. And as they grow old, they start, walking into their greatness, walking into their uniqueness. And when I first came into the league, everybody was like, oh, man, you got to be like Peyton Manning. Oh, man, you got to be like Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Oh, man, you got to be like this person, that person. And I'm like, I'm different. I don't want to be that. But that doesn't make them better than me. That doesn't make me better than them. We all are completely different, and we attack the game in a different manner. And I don't think people were ready to embrace that. But now when I look around the league, you see Lamar Jacksons, the Kyler Murrays, the Dak Prescotts, the minority quarterbacks now, and I don't even think they're minority quarterbacks no more. They're majority quarterbacks, and now the Matt Ryans and the Matthew Staffords are the minority talent.
That's a great way of looking at it. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
Can I steal that sometime and use it on air?
Absolutely.
That's pretty good. I like that.
Absolutely. When I came into the league, the only African-American quarterbacks that was still starting quarterbacks was Donovan McNabb,
Yeah.
Michael Vick. That's it.
Yeah, it's so what has changed? Is it become more accepted? Are people like what's changed? Why all of a sudden is it now the majority as opposed to the minority? What's the biggest difference?
The game's changed. And the game's changed where even Aaron Rodgers is not even, this drop back quarterback, because he can and he has the capabilities to affect the game using his feet, which makes him a dual threat, right? And when you see a guy like Josh Allen, exceptional talent, that big, strong, but as accurate as a Patrick Mahomes. And now we're always looking for the new best thing or the new next thing. And with that, defenses have always been able to just run a man coverage, have 4 to 5 man pressures, and just throw off timing in the passing game. You do that now, if somebody takes the wrong passing lane, now the quarterback is the biggest weapon. It only takes Lamar Jackson one time to scramble for 32 yards, and then you would never see cover 2 man or cover 55 or cover 88, however you want to cut it and cook it. You would never see that in.
Is there one of these guys that you watch today that even you were impressed by? You say, man, this guy, he's special.
Man, first off, I'm gonna answer your question, and I'm gonna come back to that point you just said. As a fan of the game, I think it's multiple players that stand out to me. Number one, not being controversial by anything, I think Deshaun Watson is, if not the top 3 quarterbacks, just with his skill set and his talent. It's crazy what he's went through, and I hope everything works out. But when I see Josh Allen, right, and I see what Matthew Stafford was able to do with the talent that he had, it only validates, how and what he was. For that skill set is rare. When he made the no look, kind of dig throw in the Super Bowl, like people, it just flashed past, and it was just like, hold on, wait, what? You didn't appreciate that until days after the Super Bowl, and you was like, damn, like he had that in his bag to do, but he's been doing that so long in Detroit, but he wasn't playing meaningful games. Let's just call a spade, right? When I see Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick has changed the game, he's the football Steph Curry, where he's like the flash in the frying pan that like everybody loves when you at like the Chinese steakhouse or the Benihana's, and you're like, oh, like, and you see these different athletes, and how dare we forget about Lamar, as if his skill set is not elite too. So I'm a person, man, that I'm a fan of everybody. And every time I sit up here and watch, Aaron Rodgers or even Tom Brady work, it's just like, how can you hate their greatness for what it is? And when you're talking about Super Bowls, when you're talking about wins, one thing that I've grown to understand about sports as a whole, as a football player and as an athlete, there's so many different determining factors of a football game that people don't kind of give the notion to or the respect to. Like, I need so much of my offensive line to help me so that I can be as great as I am as an athlete. So when you talk about Brady and his Super Bowl rings, when you're talking about the MVPs from Aaron Rodgers and things like that, he had an unbelievable supporting cast that allowed him to be who he was.
You know what's amazing? Again, I think back in my time covering the National Football League, and I remember when I was covering it, and John Elway, Jim Kelly, Dan Marino came in the same draft class, 1983. And when they were leaving the game, people wondered, well, who is going to carry the torch? Who's going to carry the mantle? And I would venture to tell you that the game today, with the quarterbacks in it, never has been in a better place with more great quarterback play than ever before in NFL history, all at once. There are so many great quarterbacks, so many great people at what they do. And so the league is in a great spot for
So
that.
the franchise quarterback is in a great position for a lot of different franchises. Just to see what Joe Burrow has been able to do, you know what I'm saying? The swagginess that he got, I appreciate that. You know, but back to what you were saying. Name me one of your best sporting events, and I'll say mine.
Best sporting events.
Or a football event.
See, but I look at it differently.
Why?
Because I don't look at it like a fan or attending games. Like, my job now is to be in the studio. I don't get to go to too many games. I get to go to the Super Bowl every year. I'm going to the Combine. I'm going to the owners' meetings. I'm going to the draft. The draft, to me, is a great sporting event that you wouldn't ordinarily think of, but it's exciting because there's hope for 32 teams. Everybody thinks
their guy is the guy.
And he's giving that guy hope. So you're showing up, and the NFL has done an unbelievable job at putting it in these cities. It used to be every year in New York City.
And it was the Jets dominated. It was the Giants dominated.
And that was always part of the fun, listening to the Jets and Giants fans agonize over their team's picks. Now they've taken the draft. They've gone to Chicago. They've gone to Dallas. They've gone to Cleveland. They're going to Las Vegas. They went to Las Vegas. They're going to Kansas City. So they take it on the road now, and it's a huge event. It's a huge deal. Wherever the draft is. When you're in New York, it's spring in New York. Okay, there's so much going on. When the draft is in another city, it feels like it's the biggest deal in town. So I would say the draft, to me, where there's actual news happening, where there's selections being made, where there's hope given to all these teams, that, to me, stands out more than going to a playoff game or a Final Four. I don't get to go to that anymore. I like going to the Masters.
Really?
I've gotten into golf. I've gotten into. Oh, you never been?
Never been.
You know, last year
and I'm from Atlanta, so it's
well, that's what I'm saying.
A lot of traffic.
I went for the first time in 2020, and I couldn't believe how many quarterbacks there were roaming the grounds. Now, I went in a year during the pandemic when it was virtually empty. I think it was 20% capacity. But everywhere I went, there were a bunch of quarterbacks. You missed out because it was fun. And to watch these guys and do what they do, man, they're awesome.
So I would say my favorite sporting event was really two, and I'm gonna dip my barbecue sauce and honey mustard. Number one was Miami and Ohio State National Championship, and
Orange Bowl, right? Wasn't it the Orange Bowl?
Orange Bowl, and
Fiesta Bowl. It was the Fiesta Bowl.
It was the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah,
it was the Fiesta Bowl, and I told Ken Dorsey, who coached me in Carolina. Now shout out to Ken, who just got promoted as the OC for the Bills. I told him, like, man, I look up to you. I wanted to be him. He had Andre Johnson, he had Willis McGahee, Frank Gore, all these different athletes. And here I am, as a kid, and real tears came. And I remember, like, being in a very religious household. We said a prayer for Willis McGahee.
Yeah, that was unbelievable that night.
When he tore his knee up, and it was remarkable to see how he bounced back from it. Had an amazing NFL career after that. But I cried because I wore two in my younger days because of Willis McGahee. He had the smoked out mirror visor. And I was like, man, I want to be that right there. You know what I'm saying? So between the Ohio State, Miami Hurricanes National Championship, and then the Texas and USC.
Oh man.
National Championship. It was just like gripping.
And see, I can remember where I was for each of those games. I was on a date in Denver during the Miami-Ohio State game. And the USC-Texas game, I was flying from Los Angeles to Seattle for a football game or a story to sit down. But I was on the plane, I landed, and they said that Texas had upset USC.
Right.
And who would have thought that was going to happen at that time, right? It was unbelievable.
Man, I just remember, the person who Reggie Bush was and is still, man, it was so iconic. He was so electrifying, so like bold to do some of the moves that he did, and then he tried to throw the pitch back in the actual real game.
Yeah.
That's something that he got kind of backlash for.
Those games they become moments of you remember where you were.
Yes.
They really do that, and that's also what great sporting moments do.
Correct.
You remember where you were, what your mood was. You can remember all the things that come along with it.
Right.
To me.
Yeah. So I mean, let's just be honest. Sports brings a lot of people together, and it brought us together. And I'm blessed to be able to say that I can share this opportunity with you. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up, and I think it's important for people to kind of understand. Like, we both have been guilty of being slandered in the media in some way, shape, form, or fashion, right? And especially in your position and in my position, social media does so much good, right? Social media does so much good for enhancing, getting the story out. But for me, I think there has been times where it's like, man, I shouldn't have pressed that button. Or there's been times where it's like, golly, I didn't mean it that way. So when you have so much power that you have, right? And from a viewer who's looking at it and I have access to younger kids. I have a 707 All-Star team, which I just partnered with Overtime with, that you help get the word out. Perfect example. And it's like, I'm always reminding them, it's like, bro, you have a following. Do right by your following. And sometimes, we said this off camera, it's like, what puts me at ease is I know my heart. I know my intentions. And I know even with you taking a chance today, I said, Adam, I'm not a journalist. I'm a person who just loves people and loves having conversation. And what could you tell the viewer from the mistakes that you've had and what you've learned from it, and how could it have been avoided in your opinion?
Well, I just think that with that medium, there comes a great responsibility. And you have to be very, very thoughtful. And you do the best you can, and sometimes, inevitably, that's not good enough.
Right.
And so you have to just be that much more thoughtful and careful with everything. And you remind it again and again, we're all human.
We all are human.
We all make mistakes. I remember speaking to a couple of people, lawyers or agents, and I'm like, yeah, you ever do something and you make a mistake on the language of it? And they're like, you're right. And I said, and you think about it, right? Yeah.
Right.
Well, guess what? Same.
That's what happens.
In this field. And for 16 years, I was a newspaper writer. Think about this also.
What?
I was a newspaper guy for 16 years. You didn't know that?
No.
Really?
No. And where was this?
In Denver.
Denver. Born and raised in Denver?
No. Born and raised in New York, but moved out to Colorado in 1990 and spent almost 16 years covering the NFL and the Denver Broncos. I moved out there at the age of 23, didn't know anybody.
Right.
And so that's where professionally this started. Of course, went to Michigan and Northwestern Graduate School, but Denver, I always tell people I got my undergraduate degree from University of Michigan. I got my graduate degree from Northwestern, but I got my master's in football from the Denver Broncos.
Okay.
Being around them.
Right.
And it was different back then. I'd be at training camp be 3-4 weeks at a time.
Right. Real two-a-days.
Real two-a-days. And we were staying in the dorms, and I'd have breakfast, lunch, dinner around the players, around the coaches. You'd be in the same area.
Right.
It just was a lot more personal. You get to know people. It's not like that anymore.
Right. It's more of a business.
It's way more of a business.
I think the person who kind of mentioned how things have changed was my coach, Mike Shula. And obviously his father was Don Shula, and his whole life has just been around the game, you know. And when he was saying, I was teasing him about, you know, just what's cool and what's not cool. I was the inaugural or self-appointed swag coach on the team. And I was like, Coach, nah, you know, we're gonna have to find you for that outfit. You know what I'm saying? You coming on the team playing, wear it looking like that. And I would love the conversations that we would have. He would say, man, I remember a time, this league has changed, where at the end of the games, going back to, you know, our respective cities after the game, they used to give you a case of beer.
Wow.
And some cigarettes. And you could smoke it on a plane.
Yeah.
So just imagine 46 to 53 players on top of the personnel smoking cigs, you know what I'm saying, just having a good time. But now you can't
back in the day, players had to get jobs during the offseason.
Yeah.
Their jobs weren't to be football players year-round. They had to go do something before they got back to it. So it just goes to show you how the sport has evolved, changed, grown. The money in it is increased. And so you may have been 5-10 years before your time in terms of the money. Because the money is going crazy for quarterbacks.
That is true.
Right?
That is true. But even then, I always tell people, it's like, I got, you know, I was the sacrificial lamb, for so to speak, because my year was the lockout year. You know, the year before, I think, was it Sam Bradford?
So you're right. Oh, so you were the first.
I was the first
quarterback.
The first
contract
person
under the new CBA, where the rookie wages were limited.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that cost you guaranteed money.
Yeah.
A lot of guaranteed money.
A lot. So literally, not just the first quarterback, not just the first
overall pick.
First overall pick. So it affected me the most.
So Sam Bradford got how much? He got about $50 million guaranteed, if my memory serves me correct.
Right.
Your first contract guaranteed was
22.
So that 28 million guaranteed. The new CBA cost you.
Right. And then you had to sign. You couldn't sign after your deal was up. The team reserved the right to sign your 5th year.
Right.
So you had to wait 5 more years, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like here we go. But needless to say, man, I've been blessed. Like this game of football has rewarded me so much. And like I said, anytime I have opportunity to be around my kids, we just left a tournament this past weekend in Knoxville, and we had teaching moments where it's like, man, listen, you can't do that. You can't do certain things. And a lot of people, I've gotten so close to my children, not my biological children, but my all-star kids, that they don't see me as Cam Newton. They see me as Coach Cam, or they see me as Cam, right? And when we go different places and I'm actually coaching them and I'm actually there on the bus traveling with the team, I'm actually in the hotels living with the teams. And, you know, they lose that thrill of knowing like, oh my God, like our coach is a public figure. And oftentimes people will run up to you and you'll have a mishap where somebody will say, you know, can we take a picture? And I always ask, are you asking me to take a picture or are you telling me to take a picture? There's a difference. If you're asking me, I reserve the right to say no. But if you're telling me, you're automatically saying, take this picture or I'm going to bash you. Or I'm going to say something. Of course, it happens all the time.
So how do you deal with when you're with your 7 children, when you're with your family, when you're with dinner, when you're wherever you are, coaching your team, and people come up, there seems to be a time and a place for it, right? There's certain times it's appropriate and certain times it feels inappropriate.
Right.
So how do you handle it?
First off, my rule is if I'm eating, I'm not stopping. If I'm with my children, I need to be a dad. You know, because there's times where, I've thrown for 117 yards, threw for multiple interceptions, sack, strip, and I come home and only first thing you hear is, Daddy! It puts everything into perspective. But then I've also threw for 300 yards, multiple touchdowns, multiple rushing touchdowns, and I come home and somebody's crying, and then you go in instant dad mode. So,
but if that person asks you, and that person's a big Cam Newton fan, and you're with your family, and they don't understand that, and you say, yeah, I'm not taking a picture, I'm not signing, now they remember you in a different light.
Correct. So I have it memorized in my memory bank. If a person comes up to me, let's say if a person comes up to me right now and say, hey, Cam, can I get a picture? I'm like, man, listen, I'm with my kids right now, man. I appreciate you for understanding this is a very tender moment for me. I just want to be dad. Oh, man. You know, I get it. Most people will get it.
Yep.
You know, but you have these horror stories that kind of take place, and it's just like, bro, Like, I don't owe you nothing. Like, I need to be a father to my children more so than I need to be a fan to you. And I look at it like, if you're going to judge me off one instance where I'm human, then you wasn't a fan from the jump. Because there's certain people that you can give a drip of water to and they'll be forever thankful. And then there's other people that you can give the ocean to and then they still, well, I want the Pacific too. You know what I'm saying?
There are some crazy situations that come up.
It is what it is. So, I mean, going back to the topic of knowing the platform, right? Mm-hmm. I'm always reminding people left and right that once it's sin, it's hard to recant it. You dig what I'm saying? And for me, I've been burned for things that I've said, and I'm saying to myself, it's like, golly, I wish everybody would understand my intentions for it. And sometimes you don't have that opportunity to do so. But in a way, I think people are owed to know that it wasn't said out of malice. It never was said to bring any type of equality or hurt or any pain to nobody. We all are entitled to our own opinions, right? And the thing that the day and time that we live in, we are expected to be perfect in an imperfect world.
But as one of my bosses said to me, one of my dear friends, he said to me, other people's perceptions are your reality.
Wow, hey, that's player right there. That's player.
So if they perceive that you're wrong or they perceive that I'm wrong,
yeah,
then the reality is
right.
You're wrong and I'm wrong.
Right.
And so I always think my job is to dispense information. Mm-hmm. So there's a reason I'm on social media. I try to dispense information there.
Right.
I've always wondered with athletes, to me, I know that they want to exercise their muscles and whatnot, but I always think if I'm an athlete, the only reason I'm going on Twitter or social media is to praise my teammates, my coaches, my organization, promote my charity. And short of that, my life, I'm keeping it to my life.
Right. But
it's limiting, it's confining.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I understand that, but I just see what happens sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I think to that point what I was saying earlier, that it's hard to use the platform that we do have by allowing people to understand that we don't have the luxury that Steph Curry has. We don't have the luxury that LeBron James have. We don't have the luxury that Paul George may have or any basketball players because they see their faces. They're able to see, like, I think the dopest thing that I've seen LeBron James do, in my honest opinion, is show up to Bronny's games. I don't even know Bronny, never met him. But I'm like, man, just to share that father moment where you know, and you have kids, you know, it's like there's a proud father moment, there's a proud family moment where it's just like, man, that's my boy, that's my daughter, that's my girl right there. And you use social media to tell that, to do that. And even then, it's like when you're in a position where only thing people care about is the weekly interviews of Cam, you know, what does this team look like? What does the Seattle Seahawks, you know, kind of give you to prepare for? You know, what are you thinking about the Atlanta Falcons? What are you, you know, what is this something that you're getting prepared for the New Orleans Saints? And it's like, yeah, that's my job, but I'm a human, I'm a dad, you know what I'm saying?
Would you not rather see any of your 7 children succeed, star, conquer, have a great game on the team that you're coaching? Wouldn't that be as meaningful, if not more meaningful to you than anything you could do on the football field?
It is.
Of course. There was an incident this year where I got home from a Monday night game in Pittsburgh, and I remember walking in my house at 8 a.m. The alarm rang. The alarm rang in Pittsburgh about 3:30. Got picked up at 4. Went to the airport for a 6 o'clock flight in Pittsburgh. Flew home. Walked in. I'm exhausted. I want to go to bed. And my daughter had done work this year for Nickelodeon, doing a weekly interview. She was their NFL correspondent.
Right.
And they called that day, and the regular host was sick, couldn't come in. They wanted to know, could she come into New York City and host the show with Nate Burleson?
Wow. Is that the slime?
Slime time.
Yeah.
So they sent her some lines to practice in the car, and she starts reading it. I'm going, oh my God. And I'm watching her on the set, And I am way, way more nervous and anxious watching her than I ever would be
Right.
for anything that I've
you
ever
had
done.
to do.
Well, except for at the start of my career. But yes, modern day, anything I would do now,
Right.
nothing compared to watching her.
Correct.
The nerves, the anxiety, and all that mattered to me was seeing her crush it that day. And she did.
Right.
And there's nothing that makes you feel more proud
Right.
as a parent than seeing your child
Right.
succeed.
Absolutely. And even, I mean, let's just be frank. That's what I'm battling right now. As a free agent, there's teams calling, and I'm getting interest, but I'm like,
You have to leave your kids.
I believe, like, it's not.
They can't go anywhere. They can't.
They're at an age now. I've always kind of looked at it like, and I respect the people who protect this country, but military kids, they travel so much. I never wanted that to be my child, to be able to, start in one school, then go to another school. The children need stability, right? And it was my job and how I felt and how I feel, not to take anything away from anybody else and what their family demographic and dynamic was. But for me personally, I just wanted to give my children stability to say, you guys are gonna stay here, because on one front, it's easier for me to travel, back and forth, rather than all eight of us.
But on a weekend, let's say you're playing Seattle. I'm just using a team.
Correct.
Could they fly in on the weekend themselves and then fly back?
The age difference is so broad because there's a 10-year gap between a lot of them. And the older ones, they get it. I was just in LA doing a business trip with them, and they just love, like, man, you just go. We just want to go to the mall and run around, and then you just do the FaceTime checkup.
Right, so they don't care as much about being in the game. So how do you know when it's the right time to go take an offer or an opportunity that one of these teams presents when it's calling and leave your family behind? Or do you just say, you know what? There's not enough money they could pay me to leave the family behind.
I think I'm at a position right now where, I'll be honest, salary cap or lockout or no lockout, the game of football has been extremely good to me. And I mean, great.
So you don't have to work again.
I don't have to work again.
Okay.
Right?
So now
it's all about
be selective.
But then then the question may be asked is, do you still love the game? Absolutely. There's nothing, it brought tears to my family. It brought tears to my producers, almost to myself if I wasn't in this, phase of, I'm about to play a game. When I went back to Charlotte and came out the tunnel and was introduced, that was probably top 5 memories in my life.
Wow.
That, I wouldn't say the forgotten son, but the
returning son.
The returning son. And it was just euphoric just to be able to, walk around and see, like, man, baby, I'm home. I miss you. You know what I'm saying? And now I've been in the position where, we have so many different options, but at the same time, my children weren't able to come to that game. They seen it. Some of them saw it, and it was just like, and my son may have had a track meet or had a football game.
Which is what happens as they get older. There's more and more events. You're missing out on more and more.
Correct.
So if you didn't play another down, what would you then do?
I'll do this.
By the way, you can do this.
Right.
You can do this. You're good.
And the thing is, and even to lure you to get you to come here, and I was like, man, Adam, I promise you.
To lure me.
Bro, like,
it's just not easy. It's just life.
It's not. And I understand. I've done enough interviews to know, like, man, it's dry. And I've been burnt before. It takes a person to be burnt in the kitchen to really know how to cook in the kitchen.
Right, but the best meals are the ones that are just natural. They just sort of happen. Right. No one's looking to burn anybody or do anything. You're just looking to sit down with a friend and enjoy a nice meal together with some nice conversation. That's all.
Correct.
It's not hard.
Correct. So even with me, I think people know me as this, but it's so much to me. And I want to tell the world, it's like, man, look, you guys know me as that. I'm not that. I'm that to a degree, but I also just want to have genuine conversation with people. I don't want to just be, athlete or athletic based. You know, I want to tap into culture. I want to bring people together. I want to serve and be a servant to empowering people to really understand why certain people act and move the way that they move.
Well, that's what you said. You want to talk about empowering people.
Yes, sir.
Right, that's important to you. And it seems like this is a great vehicle for you to do that.
Absolutely.
And you've got a gift. And I watched that introduction. And I couldn't do that. So you know what? You can do two things that I can't. You can play quarterback and you can introduce a podcast better than I can.
I can say I owe a lot of that to the way I was raised. I'm born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's the land of the finessers, scammers, and the juggers. And I could get milk from a cow. You know what I'm saying?
And
I could sell milk to a cow. You know what I'm saying? I could sell Bibles to a preacher. So for me, I think that's an art, but it comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of trust. And you gave me that opportunity. My last question for you is who taught you the game? Who was like the person who kind of put you on? Because for me, contrary to popular belief, I would say, and I'm gonna give him his flowers right now, the person who really taught me the game of football was Derek Anderson, my backup. And D.A., man, he was just this easy-loving hippie, you know what I'm saying? You know, but people didn't know that. You know, he was the one that'd come in with his shoes off and just be like, hey, fella, hey, let me tell you, hey, just look at it like this. If these safeties roll down, the things that they're kind of giving away, the movement keys, if every single time 23's rolling down, it's gonna be cover 3. And he simplified the game for me. So when I got the MVP in 2015, it was off of Derek Anderson, Joe Webb, you know, guys who was my support cast that kind of taught me how to act, that taught me how to prepare, taught me how, hey, bro, man, your left guard, he kind of out of it right now. Just go give him some words, you know what I'm saying? So now, even last year, you know, being with Sam, I was like, bro, I know what you need. See what I'm saying? Like, there's no contingencies and no hidden motives with how I'm rocking and rolling. I want you to understand that, bro, like I'm seeing something that you're not, and I just want to help. So who taught you the game?
Well, you've been taught the game a different way than I've been taught the game. And the way I've been taught the game is to kind of cover the game. And so I've never fashioned myself as an X's and O's guy to understand and see the things that you're seeing on the field. But the way that I have learned the game is through the eyes of coaches and executives across the league, agents across the league, players and reporters. And so I see it almost as a business, and I see it as people, and I see it as all those factors coming together. The X's and O's that happen, the plays that unfold on Sunday, I know that's central to the game that most people know and love. But what I'm interested in is how a coach and a quarterback interact, how a coach draws it out of a player. What is the reason that a player rose up on a certain Sunday? How does a player get through an injury? Why did a team trade this guy? Why did the team decide to extend this player and not that player? How does it fit into the salary cap? So I'm thinking of those things. And the people that taught me the game, there's so many people. As I said, I got my master's in Denver. So I was around Mike Shanahan. I was around John Elway. I was around Ed McCaffrey, who had his four boys running around in training camp, little boys, who at that point were up to my knees, and now they're much bigger than me. And so there were so many people that I've intersected and crossed paths with. I think of Dan Reeves, a former Broncos coach who passed away within the last year.
He was the Falcons head coach.
And there are things that I learned. There was a Broncos media relations assistant, actually their senior VP of communications, Stephen Drummond in Denver, a guy by the name of Jim Sacamano, who taught me so much, just being around him. And you have to understand, I moved out to Denver at the age of 23. I'm by myself. I didn't know many people in Colorado. I would live out of the Broncos building, and I would be around the players and the coaches and the people in the front office and the executives and the media relations people. And I just watched and absorbed everything. They all taught me the game the way that I know it, which is different than the way you know it.
So even then, it's like, I would like to, tell you, number one, you've changed the game. You've changed the game. And my man Woj, the basketball version.
My dear friend.
I
love that game. You know Woj?
Right. No, I don't. But I know his work. You know what I'm saying? He's the reporter that kind of the breaking news for the basketball sector. But even then, like, for you to give so much opportunity to the people who, and I always say, there's so many people that respect your work so much.
Wow.
And they would never tell you. But for you to be able to say breaking news from Adam Schefter's, and when you see your Twitter handle with the blue check, you already know you can take it to the bank. And, you know, with that, man, it comes with a lot of responsibility, as you also know. And for people that's coming up in the ranks, that they may not have the knowledge that you may have, but they have the desire that you have. Because they may not be able to run a fast 40. They may not have the size, the God-given strength, or the speed or whatever, but they have the admiration to say, you know what, man, I want to grow up to be an Adam Schefter. You know, I want to be a first reporter to dropping and breaking news in that sense, man. And, you know, you've impacted the game in a positive way.
Let me say this, that there were so many great reporters that came before me. Like, I don't know if you know Will McDonough and Chris Mortensen.
I do know Chris.
And Peter King and John Clayton and Len Pasquarelli, and there were some unbelievable reporters. And I've just tried to follow along in what they've done, but in a social media age, which is a little bit different. And there are people that have been much smarter than me, more talented than me, but there aren't many more people that wanted it as much as me. That I will say. I was always very determined and driven.
Right.
But I don't have many skills.
Yeah.
I don't have many talents. But it's always mattered to me, and it's always been very important to me. It's been important to try to do right by people, to be fair, for them to understand your heart.
Correct.
Right?
Hey, I have to ask this question. How do you merge relationships? Because you are in the relationship business. You do right by so many different people to protect their identity, because multiple sources say, right?
Yeah.
Take me through, out of respect of protecting the interests of people.
I almost think it's become just kind of regular. Like, you just talk to people and you're just doing your job and they know. And so I even called the name of my fantasy football team, my fantasy basketball team. It's Per Sources. Those are the names of my fantasy teams. I just think people don't like to be identified. They don't want to know that they're the ones that are sharing information. And you try not to compromise people.
Correct. But at this particular point in time, people know that, you know, we have to get it out. And I think having access to people like you, they get it out in a way that they control the narrative. And it's important. So I don't want people to look at this and be like, well, he's the first one that wants to say it. But it's also people that's saying, you know what, we have to get ahead of this steamboat, you know, before it kind of gets out of hand. And I remember the first time I met you, we was at a hotel
in Indianapolis. At the Super Bowl.
At the elevator. And
yes, I remember that too.
You walked out.
It was after your rookie year?
Yes, yes. You walked out and he was like, hi, Cam, man, it's Adam. And I was like, duh, I know who obviously you are, man. He's like, if you ever need anything, so professional. And I was like, bruh, you know, it was late at night. I was just now leaving the ESPN party. And that's what the Super Bowl kind of does. It brings so many different people together. And I remember you meeting, and it was like, man, I'm gonna give you my information, and anytime you want to use me for anything, I'll protect you in a very discreet way that you know that
Did I say that to you?
Bro, to those degrees. I can't verbatim, but you made it, and it's other people that came up to me and even got my number in a way that I wouldn't have probably ever approved. And, you know, I didn't feel protected. You know what I'm saying? And you're talking to a person, man, I done been through a lot of stuff through the media.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I don't shy away from it. So when you're talking about you got a career in this.
But we never had any contact till now.
That is true. That is true.
So it wasn't very effective, whatever I said.
But because I'm able to control my own narrative with Iconic Saga, my production company, and people who I feel as if you're going to scrutinize me in a story, I do better coming out with it in my own way. I think you see that with the Players Tribune, I Am Athletes, those platforms,
Right.
And, people are able to, kind of get ahead of certain things before and tell their story. Can't forget to mention like Uninterrupted. Like these are platforms that put athletes in the forefront to be able to say what you meant to say and what you wanted to say when you didn't have the opportunity to say or you didn't say it in your right way. So, yeah.
I remember meeting you. I don't remember that, but I do know that I say to people, hey, if you ever want to talk or I can communicate with you or I'm here, you let me know. That's the way I remember it. And like I said, it couldn't have left that much of a mark because you never followed up on it.
Well, it is what it is. 13 or 12 years
But
later.
here we are now.
Here we are now, and I appreciate it. So as we end things, as we always end things at Funky Friday, both members, the interviewer and the interviewee, looks at this camera. Let's start with this camera. So you're going to look at here. You got to do it with me. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. One finger. One pinky. One thumb.
Okay. All right.
Let's try one more time. Here we go.
You're dealing with a very slow, middle-aged guy who's not very hip.
I got you. I'm about to make you hip, Adam. Here we go. We're going to look at this one more time. One finger. One pinky. One thumb. One love, man. Appreciate you, Mr. Schefter.
Thank you, Mr. Newton.
Thank you, buddy.
Boom. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Man, I would like to take this time to thank the beautiful people at Davidoff for supplying this beautiful space right across the street from the World Trade Center. And if you're wondering what cigar that I'm smoking on the best, the Royal Salomon. And it was aged for 8 to 12 years. Dominican, Ecuador blend by 8 of the finest cigar rollers. And anything that takes that long to make, 12 years, has to be the best. And if you want to cop one of these, please visit your nearest Davidoff or cigar shop to pick it up today.